There's no greater pain than a child's ingratitude, to be hurt, humiliated, and forgotten by the one you brought into this world, and all of this inside your own home. Good morning, my dears. This is Dorothy Wilson, 81 years young, speaking to you from my rocking chair in Bakersfield, California. The ceiling fan is turning slowly in this scorching heat, but thank the Lord, I now even have air conditioning in my little bedroom. I can hardly believe I can say that after everything I've been through. Today, I'm going to share a story that I've kept bottled up for almost 2 years. A story of pain, betrayal, but also of new beginnings. Before I start this difficult journey, I'd like to ask a small favor from the heart. Please subscribe to Grandma's channel, give this video a thumbs up, it costs nothing, and let me know in the comments which part of the country you're watching from. I'd also love to know how many children you have. This helps this old lady continue sharing her stories and perhaps warn others who are going through the same things I experienced. Life is hard, but together, we become stronger. Isn't that right? I was born in 1942 in a small house on the outskirts of Bakersfield. My father was a farm worker, a simple man but with a good heart. My mother took in laundry and taught me to sew from a very young age. Dorothy, she would say, with a needle and thread in your hand, you'll never go hungry. And she was right. It was with these calloused hands from so much sewing that I raised my 3 children after my Harold passed away. But let's take it step by step. I want you to understand how I got here. I started as an assistant in a small repair shop, then I began sewing at home. At first, it was just hemming pants, fixing broken zippers, simple things. Over time, I became known in town for my custom clothing, wedding dresses especially. I think I dressed half the brides in Bakersfield and the surrounding areas for more than 40 years. I met my Harold when I was 19 at a 4th of July picnic. He played the fiddle like nobody else, nimble fingers running across the instrument, playing those tunes that made everyone dance. One look over his fiddle, a little half smile, and that was it. He had me hooked. We married 6 months later, a simple ceremony at the First Baptist Church. Harold worked in a carpentry shop, making beautiful furniture, as carefully crafted as my sewing. We combined our talents and, with a lot of sweat, bought our first small plot of land. That's where we built the house where I spent most of my life. A simple house, but as solid as our love, brick by brick, with carefully counted money, but every penny saved with joy. In 1963, Ronald was born, our first child. 2 years later came Mary, my only daughter. And in 1970, when we thought our family was complete, our youngest arrived, Junior. 3 children to raise was no joke, but between Harold's carpentry and my sewing, we never let them lack the essentials. Education, food on the table, and lots of love. Time passed. The children grew up. Ronald became an accountant, found a job with a big company in San Francisco. Mary married young, moved to Phoenix with her military husband. Junior was always the complicated one. He dropped out of school early, jumped from job to job, never settling on anything. But he had an affectionate way about him, called us Daddy and Mommy, and we overlooked his difficulties. In 2013, my Harold started complaining of chest pains. At first, we thought it was just fatigue. He was already 75 after all. But it was more serious. A massive heart attack took my companion of almost 6 decades on a Sunday afternoon, while he was taking a nap in the porch swing. When I went to call him for coffee, he had already passed. It was quick, without suffering, just as he always said he wanted to go. Without causing trouble. I was left alone in that house full of memories. The children would visit me, of course. Ronald would appear during vacations with his family. Mary called every week. Junior, who had married Natalie a few years earlier and lived right there in Bakersfield, would stop by almost every day. "Mommy, do you need anything? Are you taking your medicines properly?" he would ask. In the first years of widowhood, I managed quite well. I still sewed a little, more for pleasure than necessity. I had my small Social Security check, which wasn't much, but allowed me to live with dignity. I tended to my plants, went to church every Sunday, participated in the senior group at the parish. Life went on, with that constant longing for Harold, but bearable. It was when I turned 80 that things started to get complicated. First, it was a silly fall in the kitchen. I slipped on the floor I had just finished mopping. Result? A broken arm. Then came the joint pains that prevented me from sewing as before. My eyesight wasn't helping either, even with the new glasses Ronald gave me as a gift. Living alone was becoming increasingly difficult. One day, I forgot the gas stove on and almost caused an accident. On another occasion, I fell in the bathroom and was on the floor for almost an hour before I could get up and call for help. I began to fear my own home. The stairs, the shower stall, everything that was once so familiar now seemed full of traps. It was on a Sunday afternoon, after another fall, that Junior and Natalie showed up with a proposal that, at that moment, seemed like salvation. "Mommy," said Junior while Natalie helped me with an ice pack on my injured knee, "you can't stay alone here anymore. What if you fall again and can't call for help?" "That's true, Mrs. Wilson," Natalie added with that smile I thought was so sincere. "We're worried. Junior doesn't sleep well, always thinking about whether you're okay." I was touched by their concern. It was true that it was becoming increasingly difficult to manage on my own. "And what do you suggest, my son?" I asked, already imagining they had some idea. Junior took my wrinkled hands in his, looked into my eyes with that expression he always used as a child when he wanted to get a cookie before dinner. "We were thinking, Natalie and I, what if you came to live with us? Or better yet, what if we came to live here with you? This house is big. There's room for everyone. We'll take care of you, and you won't have to worry about anything anymore." The idea seemed perfect. My house was indeed too big for an old lady alone. It had 3 bedrooms, a spacious living room, a yard with my plants, and most importantly, I would be close to my youngest son, who had always been the most attached to me. "I don't know, my son. I don't want to be a burden. You have your own lives. Petey is already 12. Teenagers need their space." "No way, Grandma," exclaimed Petey, who until then was distracted with his phone. "It'll be cool having you here. You can tell me those old stories I like." I was touched. My dear grandson wanting to hear my old stories, my son concerned about my well-being, my daughter-in-law offering to take care of me. It seemed like God was opening a door when I needed it most. "But there's one small thing, Mommy," continued Junior, now in a more serious tone. "We're having some financial difficulties. The rent on our house is heavy, and if we come here, we'll have to make some renovations to adapt everything for you. A ramp at the entrance, support bars in the bathroom, those kinds of things." I already suspected that some "but" would come. I knew my son, knew he was never one to help without asking for something in return. Even so, what came next caught me by surprise. The lawyer said the best way would be for you to transfer the house to my name, to ensure that you'll be well cared for until the Lord decides to take you. It's just a formality. In practice, nothing changes. The house remains yours. It's just that on paper, it's in my name. I confess I felt a tightness in my chest. That house was the fruit of a lifetime of work, mine and Harold's. It was the only valuable thing I had to leave to all 3 children when I passed. On the other hand, I really did need help, and Junior seemed sincere in wanting to take care of me. "And your siblings? Ronald and Mary won't agree to this," I argued. "I've already talked to them, Mommy. Explained the situation, that you need care, that we're going to give up a lot to take care of you. They understood. Of course, they'll get some of the furniture, some mementos from Dad, but they agreed that the house should be mine, since I'm the one who's going to take care of you." That didn't sound like the Ronald and Mary I knew, but Junior was so convincing, and I was so tired, so scared at the idea of continuing alone in that big house. "I need to think, my son. It's a big decision." "Of course, Mommy. Think carefully. But don't take too long, okay? Our rent is due next month, and if we're going to move, it has to be before then." That night, I couldn't sleep properly. I kept thinking about Junior's proposal, weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, I would have company, help with daily tasks, someone to assist me if I fell again. On the other, handing over the house seemed like a very big step, almost like giving up my independence. The next morning, I called Ronald. "Son, did Junior talk to you about the house?" There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, my oldest son's cautious voice, "Yes, Mom. He said you needed help, and that he offered to take care of you as long as the house goes to him afterward. And you agree with this?" Another silence. "Mom, I live far away. Mary, too. Junior is the one who's there nearby, if you think it's for the best. But you already know what Junior is like, right? He's never been very responsible. But he said you agreed. It's not quite like that, Mom. We neither agreed nor disagreed. He just came saying he was going to do this, that it was the only solution. He even said he had already talked to you and that you had accepted. That caught me by surprise. Junior had twisted the conversation, making it seem like I had already decided, when in fact I was still thinking. If you want, I can see if I can get a transfer to be closer, or you could come live with me in San Francisco. No, son. I know your life is there. You have your work, your family, and I don't want to leave Bakersfield, away from my friends, my church. Then at least don't sign anything without thinking carefully, Mom. And call me before deciding anything, okay? The conversation with Ronald left me even more confused. I called Mary, who basically said the same thing. She was worried about me, didn't trust Junior much, but understood that I needed help and that she, living in another state, couldn't do much. I spent the week reflecting, weighing every detail. On a Sunday, after church, I met with Ms. Louise, my longtime friend and president of the senior group. Dorothy, think carefully before signing anything, she advised me. I know many stories of elderly people who transferred their houses to their children and were later mistreated, thrown into a back room, treated like a nuisance. Junior wouldn't do that to me, Louise. He has his flaws, but he's my son. I know he is, friend. I'm just saying, don't hand over everything at once. Why not make a life estate agreement? That way, the house goes in his name, but you maintain the right to use it as long as you're alive. Ms. Louise's suggestion seemed sensible. I talked to a lawyer, a friend of my late Harold, who confirmed that would be the best option. The life estate would give me security, and Junior would still have the guarantee that the house would be his in the future. When I presented the idea to Junior, I expected him to be satisfied with the compromise, but it wasn't quite like that. Mommy, that complicates everything. The bank won't accept the house as collateral if it has a life estate, and we need a loan to make the renovations, buy the equipment for your comfort. But son, the lawyer said, lawyers just want to complicate things to charge more, Mom. Look, do you trust me or not? I'm your son. Do you really think I would do something bad to you? And so it went, day after day, week after week, insisting, arguing, sometimes begging, other times showing himself offended by my distrust. Do you prefer to trust a lawyer you barely know rather than your own son? He would ask, with that abandoned puppy face. The pressure was constant. Junior would show up almost every day, always with some gift, a cake from the bakery I liked, a new shawl, medicine for my joint pains. Natalie also joined the game, calling to say how eager they were to take care of me, how they would transform the house into a real spa for the best mother-in-law in the world. My other children would call occasionally, reinforcing that I should think carefully, but without offering concrete alternatives. Deep down, I think they felt a mixture of relief that someone was willing to take care of their elderly mother, and guilt that they couldn't be the ones to do it. And so, worn down by the daily insistence, by my own fragility, and by the fear of being alone, I finally gave in. One afternoon in March 2022, with trembling hands and a heavy heart, I signed the papers that transferred the ownership of my house, the house I built with my Harold, where I raised my children, where I spent most of my life, to the name of my youngest son, Junior. You won't regret it, Mommy, he said, kissing my forehead after the notary left. You'll see how your life will improve. No worries, no work, just happiness from now on. Little did I know that signature marked not the beginning of a peaceful and supported old age, but the start of the most painful and humiliating period of my life. A hell that began with smiles and promises and would soon reveal its true face. The change began the day after the papers were signed. I remember it as if it were yesterday. I was in the kitchen preparing a cornbread, an old recipe from my mother that Junior loved so much when he was a boy. I heard the sound of a car, many voices, and when I went to see what it was, I was faced with a moving truck at the door. Junior, Natalie, and 3 men carrying furniture inside. "Mommy, we're here! Surprise!" Junior shouted when he saw me, with that wide smile he always used as a child after pulling some mischief. "But son, I thought you were only coming next week. I haven't even properly prepared your room." "No problem. We'll arrange everything ourselves. The owner of our old apartment moved up the deadline. You know how it is. But it will be good. So you already have company. Natalie passed by me with 2 large suitcases, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, and went straight to the bedroom that had been mine and Harold's for more than 50 years. That bothered me a little. I had always imagined they would stay in the room that was Junior's when he was a child, or in the guest room. But I didn't say anything. After all, they were coming to help me, weren't they? "Where do you want to stay, Mommy?" asked Junior, when they were already bringing in their double bed. "In my old room, or in the little room at the back?" "In my room, of course," I replied, confused. "Where else would it be?" Junior and Natalie exchanged a quick look that I didn't understand at the time, but today I know well what it meant. "It's just that our mattress is queen-sized, Mom. It doesn't fit in the small room. And Petey needs a room all to himself. He's at that difficult age, you know how it is." "But son, that back room is so stuffy, so far from the bathroom." "We'll figure it out, Mommy. We'll clean it, paint it, make it nice. You'll see." I didn't have the courage to protest further. Deep down, that was my house, built with my sweat and Harold's. But on paper, it now belonged to Junior. And as the saying goes, whoever has the paper has the power. That same afternoon, I saw my things being transferred to the back room, a small space we used to store old junk and Harold's tools. They removed the dusty boxes, swept away the cobwebs, and there they dumped my single bed and an old wardrobe. There was no large window, just a small opening that barely let in light. "It will be fine like this, Mrs. Wilson," said Natalie, after placing an old lamp on an improvised table. "Tomorrow we'll put up some nice curtains." I swallowed hard and thanked her. What else could I do? It was that or stay alone, risking falling again and having no one to help me. In the first few days, things seemed to go relatively well, despite the accommodations not being what I expected. Junior and Natalie would have meals with me, ask if I needed anything, turn on the television for me to watch the shows I liked so much. Petey, my grandson, would even come to talk to me sometimes, asking about the stories from the old days as he had promised. These were precious moments which I savored like someone eating a rare and expensive candy. "Grandma, tell me again what Bakersfield was like when there was no television," he would ask, sitting on the edge of my bed, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. And I would tell him, happy to have someone interested in my memories, to feel that I still had value in that house. But this good phase didn't last long. Very short indeed. It was at the end of the first week that I noticed the first change in treatment. We were having dinner, me, Junior, Natalie, and Petey, when I mentioned that the food was a little salty for my taste. "Your blood pressure isn't good already, Natalie. I think you could put less salt in the food," I suggested, in the gentlest way possible. Natalie looked at me as if I had said the worst offense in the world. She dropped her fork on the plate forcefully, making a noise that startled me. "If it's not good enough for you, you can make your own food, Mrs. Wilson. Nobody here is a servant." I was speechless. I had never seen my daughter-in-law speak that way. Junior, who always intervened when she was in a bad mood, just continued eating, as if he hadn't heard anything. "I'm sorry, my dear. I didn't mean to offend. The food is good. I just commented because of my blood pressure." "Well then, eat and don't complain," she cut me off, getting up to fetch more juice. That night was the first of many when I cried quietly in my little back room, missing my Harold, my independent life, my house that no longer belonged to me. The changes accumulated, subtle at first, then increasingly evident. Natalie's good mornings became grunts. Junior's hugs disappeared. The meals, which we used to have together at the kitchen table, were now served to me in the little room. When they were served, "Mom, you're going to eat in your room today. We have visitors and there's no room at the table for everyone," Junior would say, bringing a plate with leftovers from lunch, already cold, at 3 in the afternoon, when I was almost fainting from hunger. Petey's visits to my room also became rare. Once, I heard Natalie telling him, "Don't spend so much time with Grandma, son. Old people are full of quirks. She'll end up filling your head with nonsense." The fan they promised me never came. In the Bakersfield heat, which can be merciless in the summer, I sweated in the windowless room, praying for a breeze that never came. "My son, could you buy a fan for my room? This heat is killing me." "Fans use a lot of electricity, Mom. The electric bill is already too high. And so went the first 2 months. Each small request of mine was met with sighs of impatience, looks of boredom, or simply ignored. I began to avoid asking for anything, so as not to bother, so as not to be more of a burden than I already seemed to be. The worst came when I fell in the bathroom. It was night. I had gotten up to go to the bathroom, which was far from my room, on the other side of the house. In the dark, I tripped on the rug and fell, hitting my hip hard on the cold floor. I screamed in pain, hoping someone would come to help me. Nobody came. I screamed again, louder, desperate. After what seemed like an eternity, I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway and Junior's irritated voice. "What's all this noise, Mom? It's 3 a.m. I fell, my son. I can't get up. He turned on the light, saw me stretched out on the bathroom floor, in my nightgown, shaking with pain and shame. "Just gives me trouble," he muttered, thinking I wouldn't hear. But I heard, and each word was like a knife in my already wounded heart. With brusque gestures, he helped me get up, dragging me more than supporting me. He didn't ask if I was hurt, if I needed a doctor, nothing. He just took me back to the room and left me there, closing the door forcefully as he left. I cried all night, from physical pain and soul pain. What had happened to my son, that little boy I used to rock when he had nightmares, that I defended when his father was angry, that I taught to walk, to talk, to be a person? The next morning, my hip was bruised and painful. I could barely walk. When Natalie finally appeared with a black coffee and a piece of stale bread, which now constituted my breakfast, I commented about the fall. "I need to go to the doctor, my dear. I think I hurt my hip badly in the fall." She rolled her eyes, as she did increasingly frequently when I spoke. "Mrs. Wilson, do you know how much a doctor's appointment costs these days? And Junior will have to miss work to take you. Take a painkiller, and that's it. But it hurts a lot. I can barely walk. All old people complain of pain. It's normal at your age. I'll bring you some medicine, and that's it." The medicine she brought was just a common Tylenol, which barely relieved the discomfort. I spent days dragging myself around the room, trying not to bother, trying not to be the burden they had clearly decided I was. It was during this time that I began to notice I no longer had access to the rest of the house. The living room door was always locked when they had visitors. The kitchen, once my domain where I prepared treats that everyone praised, was now forbidden territory. "You might drop things, break the new plates," Natalie would justify when she caught me trying to make a tea. "Let me make it and bring it to your room." The tea rarely arrived. My bathroom was now the back half bath, a cubicle without a shower. To take a shower, I had to wait for everyone to leave or be busy and then drag myself to the main bathroom, always afraid of falling again and being treated like a nuisance. The bed linens, which I used to change religiously every week, now went up to 2 weeks without being washed. My little room began to smell of mold, of old age, of abandonment. The money from my Social Security check, which was once mine alone to buy my medicines, give gifts to the grandchildren, help at church, now went straight into Junior's hands. "It's to help with the house expenses, Mom. You eat, use electricity, water, gas. You have to contribute." I never saw a penny of that money being used to improve my situation. On the contrary, even the medicines for blood pressure and arthritis, which I used to buy without problems, were now frequently missing. "The money ran out, Mom. Next month we'll buy them." I, who had never been without my medicines, now spent days with my blood pressure sky high, with pains that prevented me from sleeping, with no one to turn to. One afternoon, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at an old photo of Harold, when I heard raised voices in the living room. It was Sunday, the day Ronald usually called to see how I was doing. I silently approached the door, which was ajar, and listened to the conversation. "Of course Mom is fine, Ronald. Stop being paranoid. Just because she doesn't answer the phone doesn't mean something is wrong," Junior was saying, irritated. "Then why is she never available when I call? It's been almost a month since I've been able to talk to her. Because she sleeps a lot. You know how old people are. And when she's not sleeping, she's in the yard, taking care of the plants. I can't be running after her every time the phone rings." Lie. Pure lie. I no longer had access to the yard, all my plants were dying from lack of care, and as for the phone, they had never let me answer it again. They always said it was a wrong number, or a telemarketer, or that it wasn't important. I want to talk to her now, Junior, insisted Ronald on the other end of the line. She went out with Natalie. They went to church. I'll call you when they get back. Another lie. I was right there, a few meters from him, locked in a windowless room without the right to speak to my other son. That night, I cried until I had no more tears. I realized I was trapped in a trap that I myself had helped set. I had handed over my house, my independence, my dignity to people who didn't deserve my trust. I tried to talk to Junior the next day when he appeared with a plate of almost inedible food, soggy rice and a piece of chicken so tough that my fragile teeth couldn't chew it. My son, we need to talk about how things are happening here. Not now, Mom. I'm late for work. But you just got home from work, son. I have a side job at night. We'll talk later. The later never came. Each attempt of mine at dialogue was cut off, ignored, postponed to a moment that never materialized. On a particularly cold morning in June, I woke up to a silent house. There seemed to be no one. I risked leaving my room, walking slowly with the help of a cane I had found among Harold's old junk. The house was indeed empty. On the kitchen table, I saw remnants of a hearty breakfast, fresh bread, cake, fruits, things that no longer reached my room. Next to the phone, a note written in Natalie's hurried handwriting. Mrs. Wilson, we went out to take care of some things. There's bread in the refrigerator if you're hungry. Do not touch the stove. We'll be back in the afternoon. Ignoring the order, I made fresh coffee on the stove I had used for decades without ever causing an accident. I sat at the kitchen table, savoring each sip of that coffee made the way I liked it, feeling for a brief moment that I was back to my previous life. That's when I saw the bills scattered at the edge of the table, paid bills, with the stubs still attached. Moved by a curiosity I couldn't contain, I looked at the amounts. What I saw left me cold. Grocery purchases, paid with my Social Security card. Expensive clothes for Natalie, also on my card. And worst of all, a bank statement showing a high-value payday loan in my name, which I had no idea about. They were stealing not just my dignity and my space, but also my money. The little I had to live my last years with some comfort was being sucked away by those who had promised to take care of me. At that moment, sitting in the kitchen of the house that was no longer mine, I fully understood the trap I had fallen into. I was no longer a mother-in-law, a grandmother. I was just a means to obtain money, a nuisance necessary to justify possession of the house, the Social Security check, the loan, and the worst was yet to come. Much worse. Because when they discovered that I had messed with the bills, that I knew what they were doing, the little consideration that still remained transformed into something much darker. That's when the physical abuse began. That same afternoon, when they returned and found the bills out of place, the storm broke over me. Junior entered my little room like a hurricane, his face red with anger, his eyes that were once sweet now overflowing with a fury I had never seen in him. Have you been messing with my things? I tried to stay calm, although my heart was racing. I didn't mess with anything, son. I just had some coffee in the kitchen. Liar! He hit the small table next to the bed hard, knocking over the picture frame with Harold's photo. The glass shattered on the floor. The bills were all organized and now they're out of order. You saw them, didn't you? I hesitated. I was never good at lying, especially to my children. Even now, at 81, I couldn't look my son in the eyes and tell an outright lie. Yes, Junior, and I also saw that you took out a loan in my name, without my consent. That's a crime, you know? It was like lighting a fuse. He lunged at me, grabbed my arm with such force that I immediately felt it would bruise. He pulled me up, almost lifting me from the bed. And what are you going to do? Call the police? Who's going to believe a senile old woman who can't even remember what she had for breakfast? Let me go, Junior. You're hurting me. He released me with a push that made me fall back on the bed. The pain in my arm was intense, but the pain in my soul was worse. How could that furious man be the little boy I had rocked so many nights? Listen well, Mom. He pointed his finger in my face, so close that I felt his cigarette breath. The house is mine now. Your Social Security money barely covers what you eat and the expensive medicines. This loan is to pay the debts we've incurred to be able to take care of you. So stay quietly in your corner and be thankful you still have a roof over your head, because there are plenty of nursing homes out there that would love to take the rest of your Social Security to leave you lying in a bed until you die." He left, slamming the door so hard that the wall shook. I remained there, stunned, my arm throbbing where his fingers had squeezed. It was the first time my son had raised a hand to me. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last. That night, I received no dinner. The next morning, coffee didn't come either. I was being punished like a disobedient child. When Natalie finally appeared, close to lunchtime, she brought only a glass of water and a stale bread. "Junior said you need discipline. Old people are like children. They need to learn not to mess where they shouldn't." I swallowed that bread with difficulty, tears silently streaming down my wrinkled face. Natalie observed without the slightest empathy, like someone looking at an annoying insect, but not sufficiently threatening to be immediately crushed. The following weeks were of constant deterioration. The injured arm healed, but soon came other injuries. A push when I got in the way of house cleaning. A slap on the hand when I tried to take a cookie in the kitchen without permission. A hair pull when I took too long in the bathroom. Small acts of violence that accumulated, becoming normalized. Never big enough to leave very visible marks, but constant, daily, relentless. My 81-year-old body, already fragile from time, now collected bruises like someone collecting stamps. But the physical violence, as bad as it was only part of my daily torment. The words can hurt much more deeply than slaps or pushes. Useless old woman. What are you alive for? Just to cause trouble. Should have died with Dad. These phrases, repeated daily, were eroding my self-esteem, my will to live, my humanity. The worst was when they said these things in front of Petey, my grandson. At first, he seemed shocked, uncomfortable. But children are mirrors, they reflect what they see. Soon, he too began to treat me with disdain. "Grandma is really a nuisance, isn't she, Dad?" I heard him say one day, repeating the words he had heard so many times from his parents. That broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. My own grandson, whom I loved so much, whom I had rocked as a baby, for whom I had made so many sweets and told so many stories, now saw me as a weight, a problem, a nuisance. The last straw came on a Friday in August. I woke up with a high fever, my throat closed, my whole body aching. The flu, I thought, or something worse. At my age, any infection can be dangerous. "Natalie," I called, with a hoarse and weak voice. "Natalie, I'm not feeling well." She appeared at the door, irritated as always. "What is it now, Mrs. Wilson?" "I think I have a high fever. I need medicine, maybe to go to the doctor." She put her hand on my forehead impatiently, without the slightest care. "It is hot indeed. I'll see if there's any medicine for fever." She returned half an hour later with a pill and a glass of water. "This is all we have. Junior will see if he can get more medicine tomorrow." "But the pharmacy is so close, my dear. What if it's something more serious? At my age, at your age, everything is more serious, isn't it? Always being dramatic. Take this medicine and rest. If you get better, you got better. If not," she left the sentence hanging in the air, with a shrug that said more than 1,000 words. I took the medicine, praying it would take effect. But the fever continued to rise. At night, I was delirious, calling for my Harold, for my mother who had passed away decades ago. I was sweating cold, shaking, coughing so much that my chest hurt. At some point in the early morning, I heard the door to the room open. It was Junior, in pajamas, his face creased with sleep and irritation. "What's all this noise, Mom? You're waking everyone up with that cough." "I'm very sick, son," I managed to say between coughing fits. "I think I need to go to the hospital." He turned on the light, looked me up and down with contempt. "It's just the flu, Mom. Everyone gets the flu. But the fever won't break. I'm having trouble breathing." "You always have trouble breathing when you want attention. Tomorrow, if you're still sick, we'll see what to do. Now let us sleep, for God's sake." He turned off the light and left, leaving me alone with my fever, my cough, my growing fear that that night might be my last. Not because of the disease itself, but because of the complete abandonment. I survived that night, more out of stubbornness than because of any care received. The fever subsided a bit the next morning, but the cough persisted for weeks, without them taking me to the doctor, without me receiving any treatment beyond occasional teas that Natalie prepared more out of weariness of hearing me cough than out of genuine concern. It was after this episode that I began to realize the situation had exceeded all acceptable limits. It was no longer just contempt or negligence. It was a deliberate attempt to make me suffer, perhaps even to hasten my departure from this world. The food, when it came, was always cold, often spoiled. I found pieces of moldy food, leftovers that had clearly been stored for days before reaching my plate. "If you don't want it, don't eat it," was the response when I complained. There are people who don't even have this. The blood pressure medicines that I needed to take daily began to be frequently missing. "Ran out of money," they would say, although I knew that my Social Security check, added to the loan they took out in my name, should be more than enough to cover this basic expense. My blood pressure skyrocketed. I had dizziness, fainting spells. On one of these occasions, I fell in the bathroom and hit my head. The cut bled a lot, but even then, they didn't take me to the hospital. Natalie just stopped the bleeding with an old cloth, put on a Band-Aid, and told me to stop the drama. Access to the bathroom also became increasingly restricted. "You dirty everything. Waste too much water," Natalie would complain. I started taking a shower only once a week, always under her impatient supervision, timing every second, complaining about the waste. My bed linens, which were already changed rarely, now went weeks without being washed. The mattress began to smell bad, to get stains. I, who had always been so clean, so careful with cleanliness, now lived in an environment that more resembled a pigsty than a human room. On an afternoon in September, about 6 months after I'd handed over the house to Junior, I heard party noises coming from the living room. Laughter, loud music, the smell of barbecue. I dragged myself to the door of my room, which was closed from the outside, as had become habitual. "Is anyone there? Can I come out for a bit?" I called, knocking on the wood. It took a while, but finally I heard footsteps approaching. It was Natalie, with her face flushed from the heat of the barbecue, and probably a few beers. "What do you want now? What party is this? Can I come out for a bit? See people?" She laughed, a cruel laugh I'll never forget. "It's Petey's birthday. Just family and close friends." "But I am family," I protested, my voice choked with hurt. "I'm his grandmother. Look, Mrs. Wilson, you're not presentable for a party. You're badly dressed, you smell bad, and you would just embarrass the boy in front of his friends. Stay there quietly, and I'll bring you a piece of cake later, if there's any left." She shut the door in my face, turning the key in the lock to ensure I wouldn't get out. I went back to my bed in tears, hearing the music, the laughter, the sound of cutlery, the birthday song being sung, all happening a few meters from me, in a house that was once mine, at a party for my own grandson, from which I was excluded as if I were a dangerous criminal. The cake never came. The parties became frequent. Birthdays, Sunday barbecues, gatherings of friends. In all of them, I was locked in the room, isolated, forgotten. Sometimes I would go hours without water, without being able to go to the bathroom, because no one remembered to attend to me when I knocked on the door and called. There was one night when, desperate to use the bathroom after hours of being locked up, I did my necessities in a corner of the room, in a plastic bag I had saved. The humiliation of that moment is indescribable. When Natalie finally opened the door and saw what I had done, her disgust and repulsion only increased my shame. "See? Just like an animal. The old woman can't even control herself." The next day, as punishment, I went without food. "Dirty animals don't deserve people's food," Junior said when I begged for something to eat. It was during this time that I began to seriously think about dying. Not in an active way, planning a suicide. I would never have the courage for that. My faith wouldn't allow it. But I began to pray every night for God to take me during sleep, to end my suffering, to reunite me with my herald in heaven, away from that earthly hell that my life had become. "My God," I prayed silently, my trembling hands joined in supplication, "if it is your will, take me from this life. I can't take it anymore, Lord. I can't take it anymore." But God, in his infinite wisdom, had other plans for me. Plans that I still couldn't see in those dark days, but that would soon be revealed. The physical abuse also worsened. What were once occasional pushes and slaps transformed into frequent hair-pulling, painful pinches, even punches when Junior was particularly irritated or drunk. "Stubborn old woman," he would shout as he dragged me by the arm to the bathroom after I had begged for hours to be able to go. "Just gives me trouble. Should have died long ago." My body, already weakened by age and poor nutrition, was covered in marks. Purple, green, yellow bruises in different stages of healing. Finger marks on the arms, nail marks on the back, pulling marks on the scalp that had pulled out tufts of my gray hair. "What are you alive for? Just to waste medicine," I heard Natalie saying to Junior, not even caring that I might hear. "My mother died at 70, quickly, without giving anyone trouble. Yours seems like she's going to last forever, just to torment us." Each word was a stab in my already so wounded heart. Each insult diminished a bit more of my humanity, increasingly transforming me into what they wanted me to be. An object, a burden, a nuisance to be tolerated until death finally took me. At the end of 2022, about 9 months after I had handed over the house to Junior, my situation reached a new level of degradation. Winter, even mild in Bakersfield, brought cold nights for which I was not prepared. My thin blanket, full of holes, barely managed to warm me. "I'm cold, my son," I complained on one of these nights. "Could you get me another blanket?" "Cold? What you have is fussiness. There are people sleeping on the street with less clothing than you." And so I spent the nights shivering, my bones aching with the cold that seemed to penetrate to the marrow. I contracted pneumonia, which, like the previous flu, was not properly treated. Just generic medicines for fever, teas of dubious efficacy, and the hope, theirs, not mine, that the disease would solve the problem once and for all. Again, to their disappointment, I survived. But with each passing day, I became weaker, more dejected, closer to becoming what they said I was. A vegetable, a body without utility occupying space, consuming resources, giving trouble. It was then that I heard, for the first time, the plan that would seal my fate, or so they thought. It was a night in January 2023, almost a year after I signed the house papers. I was lying in my dark little room, pretending to sleep as I did every night to avoid more humiliation. My stomach was growling. Dinner had been just a cup of thin gruel that looked more like dirty water. The mosquitoes buzzed around me, attracted by the moisture that accumulated in the corners of the room after the summer rains. I heard footsteps in the hallway, the voices of Junior and Natalie, lower than normal, as if they didn't want to be heard. They stopped near my door. "What if we put her away for good?" whispered Natalie. "There's that place out past Oildale, 40 miles from here. They say they accept elderly people for a reasonable monthly fee." "What place is that?" asked Junior, and I noticed interest in his voice. "A private nursing home. A colleague at the salon told me she left her mother there. Said it's quite isolated. Nobody really inspects it. The old folks are sedated most of the time so they don't cause trouble." My heart froze. I knew the place they were talking about, even without ever having been there. Old people's dumping ground is what we called it. A large house, isolated on a dirt road, where families dumped their unwanted elderly. Rumors circulated about the inhumane conditions, about elderly people tied to beds, about bodies that disappeared in the middle of the night. I never fully believed these stories, until that moment. "And how much does it cost?" asked Junior, already calculating values in his head. "Less than keeping her here. And the best part, they accept receiving directly from Social Security. We don't even need to serve as intermediaries. Leave her there, sign some papers, and her money goes straight to them every month. And if she complains? If she tells someone what we did here?" Natalie gave a low laugh, a sound that chilled me to the soul. "Who's going to believe a confused old woman? We just have to say she's making things up, that age has affected her head. Besides, they say they keep the old folks pretty doped up there. She won't even really know where she is." Junior was silent for a few moments. I was hardly breathing, afraid they would notice I was awake, listening to everything. "Let's think about this," he finally said. "The situation can't continue like this anyway. She gives too much trouble, hasn't gotten any better, and we can't even enjoy the house properly with her occupying space. Not to mention the expenses," added Natalie. "Her Social Security money barely covers the costs, and that loan we took out in her name is running out too. Yeah, we need to resolve this soon." I heard the footsteps moving away down the hall, the living room door closing. I remained paralyzed in bed, silent tears running down my wrinkled face. So that was it, the next step in their plan. It wasn't enough to have stolen my house, my dignity, my health. Now they wanted to throw me in a place where I would be forgotten until I died, where no one would know my name, where no one would care if I suffered or not. That night, I didn't sleep a single minute. My mind was spinning, trying to find a way out, a solution, anything that would save me from that terrible fate. I thought about running away, but to where? I had no money, could barely walk, and in the condition I was in, I probably wouldn't last a week on the streets. I thought about calling Ronald or Mary, but the phone was closely watched, and for months they hadn't let me talk to my other children. In the days that followed, I noticed a subtle change in Junior and Natalie's behavior. They were more silent, exchanging significant looks when they thought I wasn't watching. Sometimes I caught them measuring my clothes with their eyes, as if calculating what I could take, what would be left behind. One afternoon, I heard Junior on the phone, speaking quietly. "Yes, it's my mother, 81 years old. No, she can't move around on her own. Memory problems, sometimes gets confused." Each lie cut me like a knife. I might have difficulties walking, but my mind was perfectly lucid enough to understand the danger I was in. Another time, I saw Natalie rummaging through my birth certificate, my identification documents, everything that would be necessary to admit me to that terrible place. She kept everything in a yellow folder that she hid on top of the kitchen cabinet, out of my reach even if I could get out of the room. The tension grew with each passing day. I began to notice other worrying signs. Junior making suspicious calls, Natalie buying large bags, as if preparing to pack my things. Once, I clearly heard when they were arranging a date. "Friday is better," Natalie was saying. "That way, we can leave her there and still enjoy the weekend without worry. And if she gives trouble? If she screams, makes a scene? We'll give her a sedative in her coffee before leaving. She'll be so groggy, she won't even notice where she's going." Those words filled me with an icy terror. They were planning not only to abandon me in a horrible place, but to drug me for it, taking away even my ability to protest. It was too cruel, too inhuman. That's when things reached another level, even more frightening. One night, I woke up startled from a nightmare. I was thirsty, my throat dry as sandpaper. The water bottle beside the bed was empty. Natalie often forgot to fill it before locking me in for the night. I knocked on the door, calling softly, hoping someone would hear me. After a few minutes, the door opened. It was Junior, red eyes, whiskey breath. He had clearly been drinking heavily. "What is it now, old woman?" he growled, staggering a bit. "I just wanted some water, my son," I asked, trying to sound as humble as possible. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes clouded by drink, his expression increasingly angry. Water, water, always asking for something. Never satisfied. "I'm sorry, son. If it's too difficult, forget it." "Difficult? Difficult?" His voice suddenly rose, startling me. "You don't know what difficult is. Difficult is having to take care of a useless old woman who just gives trouble. Difficult is spending what I don't have on medicines and food for someone who should have died long ago." I retreated on the bed, frightened by the explosion. I had never seen Junior so out of control, so full of hatred. "If I weren't afraid of jail," he continued, approaching dangerously, his finger pointed at my face, "I would have solved this another way. A pillow over the face while you sleep, and done. Problem solved." I was paralyzed with horror. My own son, blood of my blood, talking about killing me as one would talk about killing a cockroach. How did we get to this point? What happened to that little boy I rocked in my arms, who I protected from his father's scolding, who I taught to walk, to talk, to be a person? "Don't look at me with that scared face," he growled. "You think we don't notice? That you're just pretending you don't understand things? That you're smarter than you appear? Well, know that this will end soon. Friday, you're going to a place where you'll be treated exactly as you deserve." He left, slamming the door, leaving me in darkness, trembling not just from thirst, but from pure terror. This was no longer just negligence or mistreatment. It was a clear threat to my life. The next day, when Natalie came to bring breakfast, a stale bread and a cup of cold coffee, I noticed something different in her behavior. She was almost cheerful. She hummed softly while mechanically tidying the room, opening the curtains to let in a bit of sunlight, something she rarely did. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, with a false solicitude that frightened me more than her usual hostility. "Yes," I replied cautiously, suspicious of this sudden change. "Good. You need to be rested. We have a surprise for Friday." My blood ran cold. The surprise could only be the clandestine nursing home. They were really going ahead with the plan. "What surprise?" I asked, trying to sound casual, as if I didn't know anything. "Oh, I can't tell. But you will like it. It's a new place, different, with people who will take very good care of you." Each word was said with a smile so fake, so forced, that it looked like a grotesque mask on her face. Her eyes, however, remained cold, calculating. "Natalie," I risked, my voice trembling a little. "I don't want to go to any nursing home. I want to stay here, in my house." Her smile disappeared instantly, replaced by an expression of irritation and surprise. "Who said anything about a nursing home? Have you been listening to conversations behind the door?" "No, I just—" She grabbed my arm forcefully, her long nails sinking into my paper-thin skin. "Listen here, old woman. Don't complicate things. Everything is already arranged. Friday, you're going where you should have gone long ago, a place where you won't bother anyone anymore." She released my arm with a push that almost made me fall off the bed and left the room, slamming the door. I heard the key turning in the lock. I was locked in again. The next days were a nightmare of anxiety and fear. Every noise, every muffled conversation on the other side of the door made me jump. I tried to eat as little as possible of what they brought me, afraid they were already drugging me to facilitate the transport. I slept in small naps, always alert, always expecting the worst. Thursday arrived, the eve of the fateful day. That night, I heard unusual movement around the house. Suitcases being dragged, agitated voices. Were they packing my things to take me away? Or worse, were they preparing for the other way that Junior mentioned in his explosion of anger? That's when I heard something that gave me a thread of hope. A different voice, female, not Natalie's. I couldn't distinguish the words, but there was a tone of concern, of questioning. Then, Junior's voice, defensive, nervous. Everything is fine. She just doesn't appear on the street because she prefers to stay in the room. Seems strange. It's been a long time since I've seen her even at the window." "Your business? Mind your own life." The front door slammed shut. Silence. Then, Junior's heavy footsteps down the hall, reaching my door. He opened it violently. "Have you been signaling to the neighbor, asking for help through the window?" "No, son," I replied, genuinely confused. "The window barely opens, and I can't even reach it without help." He looked at me with suspicion. His eyes narrowed, looking for signs of lying on my face. "Mrs. Jenkins came here, all concerned, saying she hasn't seen you for weeks, that she finds it strange that you're not taking care of your plants anymore." "How would she know that if you hadn't said something?" "I didn't say anything, Junior. I swear to God. I haven't had contact with anyone for months." He continued staring at me, his jaw tense, his fists clenched. For a terrible moment, I thought he was going to hit me right there. But then something seemed to change in his expression. A calculation, a decision, whatever. "Tomorrow this won't be a problem anymore. Tomorrow you're going to a place where no nosy neighbor will ask questions." He left, locking the door again. I was left alone in the darkness, my heart beating fast. So that was it. Tomorrow would be the day. I tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. How to ask God to save me when my own son was planning my end? At some point in the early morning, exhausted by fear and anxiety, I fell asleep. I dreamed of my Harold, young as when we met, extending his hand to me, calling me to dance. Was it a sign that my end was near? That we would soon be reunited in the beyond? I woke up startled by the sound of altered voices, many voices, not just Junior and Natalie, but others, unknown. There was a tone of authority in some of them that made me hold my breath. "Court order, report of mistreatment. We need to see the elderly woman immediately." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Could it be? Had someone come to rescue me? The key turned in the lock, the door opened. But it wasn't Junior or Natalie. It was a middle-aged woman, hair tied in a severe bun, gentle but determined eyes. Behind her, a uniformed man, a police officer, I realized by the badge. "Mrs. Wilson," the woman called, approaching the bed cautiously. "My name is Dr. Carmen from Adult Protective Services. We've come to see how you are." The tears came instantly, uncontrollable. I couldn't speak, just cry. Years of pain and humiliation finally finding an outlet. The woman came closer, sat on the edge of the bed. When she saw the bruises on my arms, the conditions of the room, my general state of malnutrition and abandonment, her expression changed to something between horror and controlled fury. "We're going to get you out of here immediately," she said, holding my hand gently. "No one is going to hurt you anymore. Never again." And so, in a moment that seemed taken from a good dream after a long nightmare, I saw my tormentor being handcuffed in the living room. Junior, my son, the boy I once rocked in my arms, was now being taken away by the police, shouting that it was all a lie, that I was senile, that I was confused. Natalie was crying, begging, saying they always treated me well, that they didn't know anything, that the marks were from falls, that I made up stories. But the evidence was there, visible in my emaciated body, in the filthy room, in the controlled medicines they found in the kitchen, the sedatives they planned to give me before taking me to the clandestine nursing home. While a medical team examined me, I heard the full story. Mrs. Jenkins, my neighbor of decades, had noticed my prolonged absence. At first she believed the story that I preferred to stay in the room, that I was becoming senile. But her suspicion grew when she noticed that my plants, which I cared for with such affection, were all dead from lack of water. Dorothy may be old, may be sick, but she would never let her plants die like that, she said to her daughter. The previous afternoon, she had come with the excuse of borrowing sugar, hoping to see me. When Junior sent her away rudely, her suspicion increased. Walking around the house, trying to peek through the windows, she heard a weak groan coming from the back room. "Help me," a voice she recognized as mine, although much weaker and more tired than she remembered. It was enough. She called her daughter, who worked at the city hall. The daughter activated Adult Protective Services, who made a surprise visit with police support the next morning. They arrived just in time. In the living room, they found the yellow folder with my documents, a map with the location of the nursing home, and even a receipt for sedatives purchased at the pharmacy. Everything ready for the trip that would happen that same day. As they prepared to take me to the hospital, I looked one last time at what had been my home, built with so much love alongside my Harold. The walls that had witnessed so many happy moments now held only memories of pain and betrayal. But even so, I felt a pang of sadness for leaving it, not for the house itself, but for what it once represented. A home, a family, love. At the hospital, the doctors were horrified by my condition. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple bruises in different stages of healing, bed sores on my back from lying so long on the same filthy mattress, an infected ingrown toenail that was never treated, teeth in terrible condition from lack of hygiene. How can anyone do this to their own mother? I heard a young doctor murmur to the nurse, thinking I wouldn't hear. How indeed? It was the question that tormented me day and night. How had my son, blood of my blood, transformed into that monster capable of such cruelty? Where did I go wrong in raising him? What could I have done differently? Perhaps I'll never find answers to these questions. Perhaps some souls are born with this seed of evil, which germinates slowly over the years, no matter how much love they receive. What I know is that on that day in January 2023, when I thought I was about to be discarded like old trash, life gave me a second chance. A chance that many elderly people in similar situations never receive. As the ambulance took me to the hospital, looking at the blue sky for the first time in months, I made a silent promise. If I survived, I would use the rest of my days to tell my story, to alert other elderly people about the dangers that can come from the hands that should protect, to be a voice for those who, like me, were silenced by fear and shame. And that's how, a few months later, already physically recovered, although the emotional scars may never fully heal, I started this channel. to tell not just my story, but the stories of so many other elderly people who face abandonment, contempt, violence, often within their own families, at the hands of those who swore eternal love. Because hell, my dears, is not a place after death. Hell can be a dark little room at the back of the house that was once yours, with a door locked from the outside and a son on the other side planning to get rid of you. I was hospitalized at Bakersfield Memorial Hospital for almost 3 weeks. My body, fragile as tissue paper, needed much more than medicines and IV fluids. It needed to recover the humanity that had been torn from me during that terrible year. The first days were the hardest. Every time someone in a lab coat entered the room, I would shrink in the bed, expecting shouts, pushes, insults. The sound of the door opening made me tremble. "It's going to take a while for her to feel safe again," I heard a psychologist explain to the medical team. The trauma wasn't just physical. Gradually, like a dried-up little plant that finally receives water, I began to revive. I remember the first complete bath, given by nurses with gentle hands who washed my hair with fragrant shampoo, cut my nails, applied cream to my dry skin. I cried like a child when I looked at myself in the mirror afterward. How long had it been since I'd seen myself? That lady who was too thin, with a frightened look, seemed like a stranger. "Mrs. Wilson, you have a visitor," announced the nurse on a warm afternoon in February. My heart raced with fear. Could it be Junior? Had he managed to get out of jail? Was he coming to finish what he started? But who entered the room was a black lady with a kind face, well-arranged gray hair in a bun, an impeccably ironed floral dress. Mrs. Jenkins, my neighbor of decades, the one who noticed my disappearance, who heard my weak plea for help, who saved my life. "Dorothy!" she exclaimed, her eyes welling up at seeing me in that hospital bed. "Thank God you're okay." She extended her wrinkled hands to hold mine, and in that simple touch I felt more genuine affection than in the entire previous year. I couldn't contain my tears. "Thank you," was all I could say. My voice choked. "Thank you for saving me." She sat on the edge of the bed, holding my hands as if they were something precious. "I did what any Christian would do, Dorothy. I couldn't let that situation continue." Little by little, between tears and pauses to regain composure, Mrs. Jenkins told me everything. How she had noticed my gradual disappearance from neighborhood life. How at first she believed Junior's excuses that I was becoming senile and preferring to remain secluded. "But then I saw your rose bushes dying, and that didn't add up," she explained. "You always cared for those plants like they were your children. It didn't make sense to let them die, even if you were sick." She then began to observe the house more attentively. She noticed that the curtains in my old room were always open, the bed made as if no one slept there. She saw Junior and Natalie going out to parties, having barbecues in the yard, normal life, but never saw me with them. "One time, I brought a cake for you," continued Mrs. Jenkins. "Natalie took it, thanked me, said you were sleeping, but I saw a shadow moving in that little back room where they used to keep old junk. I found it very strange. The suspicion grew. The dying plants, the loud music on weekends, the laughter during parties, and never even a sign of the lady of the house. When I stopped seeing even the shadow in the little room, I became really worried," she said, squeezing my hands in hers. "I thought, either Dorothy died and they're hiding it, or something very wrong is happening there." That's when she decided to act, with that excuse of borrowing sugar. When Junior rudely dispatched her at the door without even letting her in, her certainty increased. She went around the house, trying to peek through the windows. That's when she heard my weak plea for help. "I recognized your voice right away, even so weak. I ran home and called my daughter who works in social services. She's the one who mobilized everything. Adult Protective Services, the Elder Abuse Task Force, the police. I then discovered that the rescue had been much more planned than I imagined in that moment of confusion. It wasn't just a surprise visit. It was a coordinated operation based on a formal complaint of elder abuse. Mrs. Jenkins and her daughter had documented everything. The dates when they didn't see me, the parties where I was notably absent, the changes in the house, the strange noises at night, my plea for help through the window. "Your voice saved you," said Mrs. Jenkins, smiling through tears. "If you hadn't asked for help at that moment, perhaps..." She didn't need to complete the sentence. We both knew what would have happened. Instead of being there, in that hospital bed receiving care, I would be in a clandestine nursing home, drugged, abandoned, waiting for death to come as a liberation. And my son? I finally asked, the question I so feared to ask. Mrs. Jenkins's face closed a bit. He's in jail, Dorothy, he and his wife. The evidence is too overwhelming for them to deny. They found everything. The medicines to drug you, the false documents they prepared, even a map to that horrible place where they were going to leave you. I closed my eyes, trying to absorb that information. My son in jail, for trying to abandon me, for mistreating me, for almost killing me slowly. Part of me felt a deep pain. After all, he was my son, blood of my blood. Another part felt a guilty relief. He could no longer hurt me. And Petey? I asked, remembering my grandson, who had been poisoned by the same cruelty of his parents. He's with Natalie's sister for now. They say they'll assess if he can stay with her permanently, or if he'll need to go to another relative. Another blow. My grandson, growing up without his parents, marked forever by this terrible story. Another victim of the greed, the cruelty, the inhumanity that had taken over the family I once loved so much. In the days that followed, Mrs. Jenkins' visit, other people began to appear. Social workers, prosecutors, court officers, all wanting to hear my story, take my testimony, understand how all of that had happened right under the noses of the neighborhood, society, authorities. I told everything, omitting nothing. The pushes, the insults, the spoiled food, the denied medicines, the nights locked in a filthy room. Each word seemed to tear a piece of my soul, but I knew I needed to speak, not just for justice for me, but so that other elderly people wouldn't go through the same hell. It was during one of these interviews that I received the news that would again change the course of my life. Mrs. Wilson, said the prosecutor, a middle-aged woman with gentle eyes behind colorful framed glasses. We've made contact with your other children. My heart raced. Ronald, Mary. How long had it been since I had seen them, talked to them? Since before all this tragedy began. Junior always said they had called when I was sleeping, or that they were too busy to talk to me. More lies, of course. They're coming to Bakersfield, continued the prosecutor. They were desperate, thinking you didn't want contact with them anymore. Junior said you were angry, that you didn't want to answer their calls, that you had asked to be left in peace. More tears, which seemed never to end. How much damage had that man caused? How many relationships had he destroyed with his lies? 2 days later, the door to the room opened, and there they were. Ronald, my firstborn, now with gray hair at the temples, his face marked by worry lines. And Mary, my only daughter, who had inherited her father's eyes, now red from so much crying. "Mom!" they exclaimed almost in unison, running to hug me. The hug hurt my fragile bones, my back still marked by bed sores. But it was a welcome pain. It was the hug of true love, of genuine affection, of the family I thought I had lost. Between tears and sobs, they told me their version of the story, how Junior gradually cut off contact, saying I had dementia, was confused, that sometimes I didn't even recognize my own children anymore. How he invented stories that I didn't want to see them anymore, that I had said horrible things about them. We even thought about coming by surprise, said Ronald, holding my hand. But he said that would worsen your condition, that the doctor had recommended avoiding strong emotions. We believed him, Mom. God forgive us, but we believed him. We only knew the truth when the police contacted us, completed Mary, wiping away tears. It was like a nightmare. We couldn't believe what we were hearing. How could Junior do this? How did we not notice what was happening? There were no easy answers. How to explain the transformation of a beloved son into a monster capable of such cruelty? Where did I go wrong in raising him? What could I have done differently? With the comforting presence of my other children, my recovery accelerated. The will to live, which had almost disappeared during that year of torture, returned with strength. I still had so much to do, to say, to experience. A week later, I was discharged from the hospital. The big question was, where would I go? The house where I had lived for decades, built with so much love alongside Harold, was now impounded by the court. It was part of the evidence of the crime, as well as being legally in Junior's name due to the documents I signed under pressure. "Come to San Francisco with me, Mom," offered Ronald. "I have plenty of space, and my wife would love to have you nearby." "Or to Phoenix," suggested Mary. "The apartment is small, but we'll arrange a comfortable corner for you." They were generous offers, coming from the heart. But the idea of leaving Bakersfield, my hometown for my entire life, scared me almost as much as what I had gone through. At 81, with fragile health and an even more fragile spirit, I didn't feel capable of starting over in a completely new place. That's when Mrs. Jenkins, who had become a constant presence during my hospitalization, made an unexpected proposal. "Dorothy, why don't you come live with me for a while? I have a spare room since my Tony passed. It's simple, but clean and comfortable. It's close to the church, the square, everything you know." I looked at this woman, who had been my neighbor for decades, but never exactly a close friend. We had been cordial with each other, occasionally exchanged recipes, talked about the weather and children. Nothing that would indicate such a level of generosity. "I don't want to be a burden, Louise," I responded, genuinely touched by the offer. "You've already done so much for me." "No burden at all. You'd be good company for this old lady living alone," she replied with that wide smile that lit up her face. "Besides, it's just until your house situation gets resolved. The lawyers are working to annul that fraudulent transfer, aren't they?" It was true. The prosecutor's office was committed to proving that the transfer of the house to Junior's name had been done under coercion, with partially forged documents. There was a good chance I would eventually recover my property, but the legal process would be long. After talking with Ronald and Mary, who promised to contribute financially so that I wouldn't be a burden to Mrs. Jenkins, I accepted the offer. The day after my discharge, I was taken not to the house I knew, but to the neighboring house, where I had so often had coffee on the porch, exchanged plant cuttings, and chatted about the prime-time TV show. The room that Mrs. Jenkins prepared for me was small but sunny. A bed with a firm mattress, sheets smelling of fabric softener, floral curtains, a small vase with fresh roses on the bedside table. Everything simple but clean, welcoming, prepared with genuine care. "I hope you feel at home, Dorothy," she said, helping me store the few clothes my children had managed to buy in a hurry, since all my belongings were in the impounded house. "I already do," I replied, holding her hand with gratitude. "More at home than I felt in the last year." The first days at Mrs. Jenkins' house were ones of adaptation. My body was still weak, needing help for simple tasks like bathing or dressing. But what a difference it made to receive this help from gentle hands that asked permission before touching, that respected my privacy, that never showed impatience. Mrs. Jenkins proved to be an exceptional hostess and an even better friend. Patient when I woke up in the middle of the night screaming because of nightmares, understanding when I had crying spells seemingly without reason, firm when I refused food out of irrational fear that it might be poisoned, sequelae of the trauma I had experienced. "The body heals faster than the soul," she would say, with the simple wisdom of someone who has lived a lot. "But everything passes, Dorothy. Even the deepest pain." Gradually, I relearned how to trust, to live without constant fear, to accept affection without expecting it to transform into violence. It was a slow process, with ups and downs, advances and retreats, but each small progress was celebrated as a great victory. The first time I managed to take a shower by myself, even if it took twice the normal time. The first night without nightmares. The first spontaneous smile provoked by a silly joke Mrs. Jenkins told during breakfast. The first time I went out to the street without feeling panic, just to sit in the small square in front of the church and feel the sun on my face. Small steps toward recovery, not only physical, but emotional and spiritual. Ronald and Mary, even at a distance, were present in the ways they could be. They called daily, came to visit on weekends when possible, ensured that I lacked nothing, from medicines to small treats like a new shawl or a crossword puzzle book to exercise my mind. It was Ronald who suggested, about 2 months after my hospital discharge, that I start recording my experience. "Mom's story could help other people, you know," he said during a visit. "There are so many people going through similar situations and thinking they're alone." That idea kept hammering in my head. Me, who had barely completed elementary school, who had always been just a simple seamstress, Could I really help someone by sharing my story? Mary brought the solution in the form of an unexpected gift on my 82nd birthday, celebrated with a simple but delicious cake at Mrs. Jenkins' house. "It's a smartphone, Mom," she explained, showing a shiny device with a large screen. "But it's not just for calling. There's an app here that you can use to record videos. Then you just press this button and voila, it goes to YouTube." I looked at that strange object with suspicion. "YouTube? What's that, my daughter?" She laughed, that crystalline laugh she inherited from her father. "It's a place on the internet where people share videos. You can tell your story, talk about what you lived through, give advice to other seniors. There are many people your age becoming successful there." The idea seemed absurd. Me, an 82-year-old lady, becoming successful on the internet? Who would want to hear what I had to say? But something inside me stirred with that possibility. The chance to transform all that pain into something positive, to use my terrible experience to perhaps save other elderly people from a similar fate. "And how does this work?" I finally asked, surrendering to curiosity. In the following weeks, with Mary's infinite patience during her visits and later through video calls, I learned to use that mysterious device. How to record, how to edit simply, how to publish. At first, it was all very confusing. My trembling hands could barely hold the phone properly, much less press the right buttons. But I persisted. With a determination that even I didn't know I still had, I kept learning, making mistakes, trying again, until I managed to record my first complete video. It was simple, just me, sitting in the rocking chair on Mrs. Jenkins's porch, briefly telling who I was and announcing that I would start sharing my story in parts. I didn't use makeup, didn't arrange my hair in any special way, didn't try to appear younger or prettier than I was. Just me, Dorothy, 82 years old, a survivor ready to tell her story. Mary published the video for me, since that part still confused me. "There we go, Mom. Now it's just wait and see if anyone is interested." I didn't expect much. Maybe some curious neighbors, some acquaintances from church. At most, other elderly people from Bakersfield who had access to the internet through their children or grandchildren. But something unexpected happened. The video began to be shared. First locally, then regionally, and soon it was circulating in Facebook groups all across America. The story of the elderly woman who was almost discarded by her own son touched an exposed nerve in American society. The abandonment and mistreatment of the elderly, this silent epidemic that affects so many homes. In 1 week, the video had thousands of views. In 2, tens of thousands. Comments began to arrive. Similar stories, words of support, questions about how to identify signs of abuse, requests for help. "You've become an influencer, Mom." Mary laughed on the phone, explaining to me what all those numbers meant. "People want to hear what you have to say." And so, almost unwittingly, I found a new mission in life. Using that smartphone that once seemed so strange to me, I began to record more videos, telling my story in detail, divided into parts so as not to be tiring for those watching. I talked about the beginning, Junior's seemingly generous proposal, my hesitation, the fateful decision to sign the papers. I told about the gradual deterioration of treatment, the first signs of abuse that I ignored or justified. I described, with tears in my eyes but determination in my voice, the months of humiliation, hunger, pain, despair. And finally, I shared the rescue, the moment when Mrs. Jenkins heard my weak plea for help, the intervention of the authorities, the arrest of my tormentors, the reunion with my other children, the slow process of physical and emotional recovery. Each video generated hundreds of comments, messages, shares. Other elderly people in similar situations found the courage to report. Family members began to pay more attention to signs of abuse. Neighbors became more vigilant, more willing to interfere when something seemed wrong. Mrs. Jenkins, who occasionally appeared in the videos as the angel who saved my life, also became a small local celebrity. People would stop her on the street to thank her, to shake her hand, to say that she had inspired a community surveillance network in their own neighborhoods. "See," she would say, smiling at me as we had our afternoon coffee on the porch, "God transforms even the worst suffering into a blessing when we allow it." And it was true. From the most terrible experience of my life, something unexpectedly beautiful had been born, a platform to speak on behalf of those who, like me, had been silenced, forgotten, mistreated, an opportunity to transform my pain into purpose, my suffering into warning, my survival into inspiration. The legal process against Junior and Natalie followed its course. They were convicted of crimes of elder abuse, misappropriation, unlawful imprisonment, attempted abandonment, among others. The combined sentences resulted in years in prison, although I knew that, with appeals and the slow pace of the American justice system, they might serve only a fraction of that. As for the house, the judge annulled the transfer, considering it a product of coercion and bad faith. After almost a year of legal battle, I received the news that I could return there if I wanted. But when I finally could enter that house again, accompanied by Ronald, Mary, and Mrs. Jenkins, I realized I no longer wanted to live there. Every corner, every wall, every piece of furniture brought two painful memories. The little back room where I was kept prisoner gave me chills just looking at the door. The kitchen where I was humiliated so many times, the living room where I was excluded from parties, the bathroom where I fell and was left on the floor. No, I couldn't live there again. I'm going to sell it, I decided that same day. And with the money, I'll buy a smaller house, more suitable for an old lady like me. I found a perfect place a few blocks from Mrs. Jenkins's house. A single-story house without stairs, with a small but sunny yard for my plants, a cozy porch for afternoon coffee and crochet. It was much more modest than my old house, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that it didn't carry painful memories, that it was a place where I could start over, where I could just be Dorothy Wilson, the retired seamstress, the grandma YouTuber, the survivor who had a story to tell. The move happened in April 2024, almost 2 years after the beginning of my ordeal. At 83 years old, I was starting a new life. My plants began to flourish again in the new yard. My sewing machine, recovered from the old house, started working again. Not for work, but for small projects that kept my hands busy and my mind alert. And my YouTube channel continued to grow, reaching more and more people, not just with my personal story, but with reflections on aging, dignity, elderly rights, signs of abuse to be observed, resources available for those who need help. Today, sitting in this rocking chair on my new porch, looking at the rose bushes that have started to bloom again under my care, I feel a peace that I thought I would never experience again. The pain hasn't completely disappeared. I doubt it ever will. The nightmares still come occasionally. The startles when I hear a door slamming hard. The instinctive fear when someone raises their voice near me. The hesitation before accepting food from someone I don't know well. These small scars will probably accompany me for the rest of my days. But I've learned that surviving isn't just continuing to breathe. It's rebuilding, resignifying, transforming pain into purpose. It's using one's own experience to illuminate the path of others who are still lost in darkness. If you're watching me now, perhaps you're going through something similar. Perhaps you're an elderly person who feels that you've become a burden to your family. Perhaps you're a concerned family member who has noticed signs of abuse in an elderly neighbor's home. Perhaps you're just someone who cares and wants to know how to help. I want you to know that you're not alone. That help is available. That it's never, ever too late to start over, to seek dignity, to demand respect. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Grandparents' Tales. Share it with someone who might benefit from this story. Because, my dears, old age shouldn't be a period of fear, abandonment, or contempt. It should be a time of harvest, of shared wisdom, of love received and returned. And together, united in this cause, we can make a difference in the lives of so many elderly people who, at this very moment, are suffering in silence, not knowing that there is a way out, a hope, a chance for a new beginning. A tight hug from this 83-year-old grandma who learned, in the hardest way, that life can knock us down many times, but as long as we breathe, there is always the possibility of getting up and moving forward. Until the next video, God willing.